When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all four, but you get that message that says this content is not available in your location, a Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package, which is instantly downloadable to your device and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Wednesday. It is the 29th of May. Hope you're all well and having yourselves a pleasant day. Today is Wednesday, so it is going to be a nostalgia day. In part two, we're going to look back at an old tournament, because why not? But here in part one, given I was not available yesterday, I thought I'd just have a little look at what's going on and what the latest is from the different journalists. Then we'll do some nostalgia, and then we'll just wrap up with a bit of gossip. Steven Gerrard has given an interview where he has talked about his time in Saudi Arabia, Cristiano breaking a goal-scoring record, etc., etc., etc. The funniest part of it all is Steven Gerrard saying that he did not go to Saudi for the money. Steven Gerrard is, I believe, either the 4th or 5th highest paid manager in the world. Steven Gerrard is not a good manager. And yet he is the 4th or 5th highest paid manager in the world. And if we take a quick look at the Saudi Pro League, Al Hilal have just won the league title, going unbeaten, by the way, Invincibles. 96 points, 14 points clear of Cristiano Ronaldo's Al Nassr. Al Ali finished in third, Al Tuwan in fourth, Al Ittihad, one of the clubs that spent huge money bringing in the likes of Fabinho, Kante, Benzema. They finished a very disappointing fifth. And Al Ettifaq, having rid themselves of the eternal flop that is Jordan Henderson, managed to rise to sixth in the table, which is a fairly good outcome, considering how bad things had been going. But at the same time, it doesn't represent the performance that should get you the fourth or fifth highest salary in all of management. With Henderson, it's worth pointing out, with Henderson, they were ninth in the league. Ninth in the league. Binned him off and got themselves to sixth. So fair play. With him, they lost 6 league games and only won 7. Without him, they only won 7 again, but then he lost 4. Just a much better team once he was gone. And congrats to them on turning it around and having the courage to say, we've made a mistake here. This fella's awful. Let's get rid. Some good players in that squad, it should be pointed out. Like Gini Wijnaldum's in that squad. He's still very good. Sekou Fofana, he had some injuries, but still a good player. Moussa Dembele had a good year. Demarai Gray was kind of average. Ekambi had a decent back half of the year once he got there as well. Would expect that they will once again come shopping in the Premier League for a couple more players. Gerrard will probably want a few more players that he's familiar with to join him over there. Should point out, of course, there is a major game taking place tonight. The Europa Conference League final is tonight between Olympiacos and Fiorentina. That game is taking place in Athens. So you'd imagine Olympiacos will have the majority of fans in the stadium. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a significant crowd outside the stadium, which will be entirely Olympiacos fans. Does look like there's a piece of open land across from the stadium, which they might set up camp in and cheer on the team from there, and it will add to the atmosphere. It's a really impressive stadium. It is the new stadium of AEK Athens. It was opened in 2022 and it holds 32,500 people. And I think it's a fitting venue for such a final. Next season, the final is to take place in Wrocław in Poland. That stadium holds over 42,000, and might well be needed now that Chelsea are in. So they'd bring a big crowd to a European final. And I think Chelsea right now, as things stand, have to be odds-on favourites to win the competition next season. But back to this season. So if we start off in the if we start off with the two teams who are in this final, Olympiacos and Fiorentina, and just take a look at how they've done domestically this season. So Fiorentina are currently 8th in Serie A. They do have one game left, which will take place at the weekend. That's against Atalanta, a makeup game that had to be postponed multiple times because they were competing in Europe, and then because Fiorentina were also playing each other in the Coppa Italia. So Coppa Italia semi-finalists, losing to Atalanta in that one. They've been in decent enough form of late domestically, 4 wins from their last 6 games. They've got some really good players. In this competition, they had to play a playoff round to get through. They lost to Rapid Vienna away from home in the first leg and then beat them 2-0 in the second leg, with Nico Gonzalez getting both goals, a last-minute penalty to win it for them. That put them in a group with Ferencváros, Genk, and Kukuriki. They drew 2-2 away to Genk, drew 2-2 at home to Ferencváros, then beat Kukuriki 6-0 at home, beat them 1-0 away, beat Genk 2-1 at home, and then drew 1-1 away to Ferencváros to win the group with 12 points, unbeaten, plus 8 goal difference. That landed them the opportunity then to rest and wait for a team that was dropping in from the Europa League. That Europa League club was Maccabi Haifa, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was either a Europa League club or a club that had finished runner-up in a Conference League. I can't remember which Haifa started off in. They beat them 4-3 away, although it wasn't away. It was in Lithuania. Weird thing where obviously the games had to be moved, but they played in a small stadium. It's the Bozik Arena in Budapest, the home of Honved. It holds 8,200 people. Now, it was built to be expandable, and it's quite an attractive stadium, but there was only 1,500 people there. So it's still going to feel cavernous and empty when it's such a small squad. Having won 4-3 away from home, they then drew 1-1 at home and advanced 5-4 in aggregate. That set them up with Victoria Plzeň, a 0-0 draw away, a 2-0 win at home after extra time. Gonzalez and Baraji with the goals, so couldn't find a winner in normal time, even playing against 10 men for 25 minutes, but still found their way through. In the semi-final, they beat Club Brugge 3-2 at home. Game kind of turned on the Onyedika red card. I thought Bruges, even though Bruges were behind, they were really starting to take control of that game. And then Igor Thiago, who's joining Brentford, he got the equaliser 2 minutes after the red card, but then it was kind of back to the wall for Bruges. And Fiorentina, as they have many times, found a late goal through Enzola. In the away leg, they went behind, but another late goal, 85th minute, a Beltran penalty, saw them through 4-3. So if we look at their team, Terracciano is the first choice goalkeeper. Took him a while to establish himself there because they had Dragowski, but they made the decision to move to him, and he's done very well. Good to see a player late in his career, he's now 34, finally get to the level that his talent has sort of warranted. Like, he was at Catania, couldn't find a starting spot there, had a couple of loans, did really well at Salernitana, went to Empoli and it just didn't click for him, but found his way to Fiorentina at 29, at 31 was made first choice and has thrived. So in all likelihood, he starts in goal. Dodo potentially starting right back. Milinkovic likely starting centre back. This is assuming actually Coyote's probably starting right back, isn't he? So yeah, Coyote right back. Milinkovic and Martinez Quarta at centre back. I'm guessing that's what they'll do. And then Luca Ranieri at left back. Pretty strong defence. In midfield, Bonaventura, Artur, Mandragora will almost certainly be there. This is assuming injuries and suspensions, but I'd assume that's what the starting 11, or starting midfield will be. And then I would guess you've got Beltran, you've got Gonzalez, and then I don't know, Belotti probably. That's probably who starts an attack for them. Belottison's coming in on loan, has sort of established himself, and I think the work rate he offers is really important. Talented team. There's not a ton of goal scorers, but they have got goals from all over. Baraji's almost certainly playing left back, isn't he? I actually just don't know what the starting 11 is going to be. I mean, Luca Ranieri's played a lot. He can play anywhere in defence, to be fair. They could go back three. I haven't paid enough attention to Fiorentina. I know they've switched between a back three and a back four a couple of times this season, but it's hard to know what they'll actually do for this one. Baraji's definitely playing. He's definitely going to play left back. So he's got 3 goals this year. Ranieri's got 5, which is really impressive. Martinez Quarta's got 8 in all competitions, which again is really good. Bonaventura has 8 from midfield. Mandragora has 5. Antonin Barak has 5. I don't think he'll start tonight. I don't think Alfred Duncan starts. He's got 2. Maxime Lopez and Gaetano Castrovilla, who's had a rough season, obviously. They've got 1 each. But in attack, Sotil has 5. Beltran has 10. Gonzalez has 15. Ikone has 5. Enzola has 7. Belotti only has 2. And Kouame only has 2. So they're not getting goals from their 9s, but they are getting goals around the team. It's a big day for Fiorentina. A big, big day. Like, this is a club that had some real good success in the 90s when they had Batistuta and Rui Costa, etc., etc. And they won a couple of Coppa Italias back then. They've obviously won Serie A titles in the 50s and 60s. They won 2, one in 56, one in 69. They're 6-time Coppa Italia winners, but the last one was 2001. They got to the UEFA Cup final in 1990. They won the European Cup Winners' Cup in 61, runners-up in that competition in 62, and runners-up in the European Cup in 57. If they lose tonight, this would be their 2nd time losing this final, because they lost it last year as well. They're the only club in Europe to have lost every major final. But it's 23 years since they had a title to raise. And the club has been through the ringer a few times in recent history. There was significant financial issues in the 2000s that the club had debts of around 50 million. They were unable to pay wages. The owner couldn't raise money. They were put into administration, declared bankrupt, and basically booted out of Serie B. They've been relegated because of their financial issues. They came to a halt, and they no longer existed. And they had to be a Phoenix club. And they've rebuilt from there. They've rebuilt themselves from August 2002 to now, from having, been dead and buried. And that's really impressive. And I think Italiano's done a pretty good job since taking over. He's there now 3 years. He's gotten to 2 finals, Coppa Italia last year, Conference League last year. But now he's got to win. He's got to win something. This is a big opportunity for them. They'll go into this game, I think, as favourites, even though it's kind of a home game for Olympiacos. I think they'll still be big league biased towards a Serie A club, but it's going to be tough. Olympiacos have had a strange season. They're on manager number 4. Well, technically number 3. They had a caretaker for a few days. They're on manager number 3. So they had Diego Martinez, who everybody should remember from a recent spell at Granada, where he did very well. Didn't do so well at Espanyol. Was hired by Olympiacos last summer. I don't understand why he was fired. He won 62% of his games. My assumption is it's because they were in the Europa League and got emptied into the Conference League, and that's kind of what triggered it. but he was fired in December after only 21 games. Carlos Carvalhal, formerly of, well, a lot of clubs, but Sheffield Wednesday, Swansea, recently of Celta Vigo, he was hired. He lasted 11 games. He did not do as well, and he got the boot. And now Jose Luis Mendilibar, who took over at Sevilla last season in the March, won the Europa League, and then got booted out of Sevilla in October. He was hired, and to his credit, he's done really well through 22 games, 68% win rate. He's actually lost more games than Martinez, but he's also won more games than Martinez. But yeah, I mean, he's potentially winning back-to-back European trophies, which would be a pretty impressive achievement. Domestically, disappointment. They finished third, 3 points off. 3 points off PAOK in the normal league season, and then 6 points behind again in third in the playoff round that they do. PAOK first, AEK Athens second, Olympiacos third, and Panathinaikos finishing in fourth. In the Greek Cup, they went out in the round of 16. That is a two-legged affair for whatever reason in the Greek Cup, and Panathinaikos beat them on penalties, which will not have sat well, given those are historically huge rivals. In the Europa League, they had to qualify to get into their group. They beat Genk 2-1 on aggregate, a 1-0 win at home, a 1-1 draw away. Then they beat Kukuriki 6-1 in the next playoff round. So these are obviously teams that Fiorentina have faced. 3-1 win at home. El Kabi got 2 in that one. 3-0 win away. Panathinaikos Retsos among the scorers. And then this is where I get confused, because they finished third in a group with West Ham and Freiburg. And I just think it's really unrealistic to have thought that they were going to get out of that group. They lost at home to Freiburg. They drew away to Bacca Topola. That's a bad result. It's the only point Bacca got. They beat West Ham at home 2-1. Then they lost in London 1-0. Fair enough. They got hammered in Freiburg, and that's a bad result, without question. Like, it's not bad. Losing is not a bad result, but getting beaten 5-0 is a bad result. And then they beat back a 5-2. Then they played Ferencváros, who had obviously been in the group at Fiorentina. They beat them 1-0 in both games to go through 2-1. Then they got hammered 4-1 at home by Maccabi Tel Aviv. And they looked dead and buried. And then they came back and they won 6-1 in the second leg, which was held in Serbia. In the quarterfinals, they took on Fenerbahce. They beat them 3-2 at home, 1-0 loss away, but beat them on penalties. And then they played Villa. A 4-2 win at Villa Park, El Kabi with the hat-trick, and then a 2-0 win at home with El Kabi getting both. There's some really good players in this squad. I recommend keeping an eye on Santiago Heze. I do still like Retsos, but his injuries, I think, will rule out him going anywhere. El Kabi looks a decent player, really does. One to keep an eye on. Everybody knows Daniel Pedence. Madi Camara, he's had a bit of an injury-plagued season, but he's still a very good player. I quite like the left-back, Ortega. Chiquinho's decent. David Carmo is very, very good, and I think worth keeping an eye on. Andre Horta's decent. Biancone, who was at Forest last year but tore an ACL and missed the whole season, he's there. Omar Richards, who was at Forest last year, is there on loan. Gelson Martins, you might remember from Sporting in Monaco and Atletico Madrid, he's there. Doesn't play a whole lot. Who else have we got? Ola Solbakken is there. Gustavo Scarpa, who spent last year with Forest. Nelson Abbey is there. Jovan Cabral is there. there's a lot of well-known players in the squad, including Stefan Jovetic. They get a lot of goals. They've got 32 goals from El Kaabi this year, 15 from Pedence, who also had 10 assists. Costas Fortounis, 11 goals and 17 assists. Georgios Masouras, 9 goals, 6 assists. Like a lot of productive players. Fran Navarro's in that group. Rodeni, the right back, is decent, 3 goals and 7 assists this year. Very good in the overlap. There's a lot of good players here. And I actually think they're going to win the game. So that's who I'm picking to win tonight. And I think it should be a good one. I really do think it should be a good game. I will be back after this break.
The delicious ice-cold taste of Dr. Pepper has a lasting effect on people. Lindsay from Sacramento said,
Pro tip, 40 degrees is the perfect temperature for an ice-cold Dr. Pepper.
why is 40 degrees the perfect temperature for Dr. Pepper? We brought in Sue from Duluth, Minnesota to tell us.
Oh, yeah, I know a thing or two about cold. Oh, that right there is the perfect kind of ice cold for Dr. Pepper. I'd share that with my friend Nancy. She likes Dr. Pepper, too, you know. My coldest...
All right, that'll be all, Sue. Having a perfect temperature for your Dr. Pepper? It's a pepper thing. Inspired by real fan posts.
Right, welcome back. So, it is Wednesday. It is Waffling Wednesday, which means it's Nostalgia Day. So, we have European Championships set to begin in a matter of weeks. That tournament will take place in Germany. This will be the fourth major international football tournament on the men's side that Germany has hosted. The second since the reunification, obviously. In 1974, the World Cup was held in West Germany, and it was won by West Germany, who defeated Johan Cruyff and the Netherlands in the final, a 2-1 win on the day. Johan Neeskens had scored from the penalty spot on 2 minutes to put the Netherlands 1 up. Paul Breitner, one of the great left backs of all time, a great midfielder as well, equalised in the penalty spot on 25. And then Gerhard Muller scored on 43 to win the World Cup for Germany. That was their second World Cup triumph. Now, in the European Championships, West Germany have won, or Germany, I should say, have won it 3 times. They won it in 72, they won it in 80, and they won it in 96 in England. But they've only hosted it once. That was in 1988. I have done a nostalgia pod on that tournament. That tournament, which was won by the Netherlands, who beat the Soviet Union in the final. The third tournament that Germany hosted, which is where we're going to focus today, was the 2006 FIFA World Cup. Now, we had a tremendous run of World Cups. 70, really good. 74, excellent. 78 is good. 82 was good. 86 was great. 90 was great. A lot of people don't like it because the football maybe wasn't exciting enough for them, but it was more tactical. But when I look at World Cups, I look at everything around them. And Italia 90 was tremendous. USA 94, tremendous. France 98 was a great World Cup. Japan, South Korea 2002 was not a great World Cup. The standard of football was very low. And not in a way where people would look at 90 and say, oh, it was a bit boring because it was like tactical and a lot more defensive. It was just poor in 2002. They did put on a good World Cup. The stadiums were excellent. But because of the part of the world it was held in, the time made it quite difficult for those of us in Europe and other parts to watch it. But it was an okay World Cup. Recently, 2010, pretty poor. 2014 was awful. 2018 was dull and poor. And 2022 was poor. 2022 is fondly remembered because Messi won. The final is fondly remembered because of the extra time and the penalties. The game itself, for 80 minutes, It's just okay. Kylian Mbappe is hyped as having had the greatest World Cup final performance ever. He was garbage for 80 minutes and brilliant after that. But 2022 is most fondly remembered for Lionel Messi winning a World Cup and for the celebrations afterwards. The World Cup itself, the caliber of football, the build-up around it, the fact that it was in winter, it was all really, really, really disappointing. The last really good World Cup we had was the 2006 World Cup in Germany. In that competition, we had incredible stadiums. The Germans do stadiums better than anyone else in Europe. So we had the Olympiastadion in Berlin, which is an absolute triumph. Atmosphere is a bit odd because of the big opening at the end, but it's an incredible stadium to sit in, to watch a game in. I'm never a fan of stadiums at running tracks, but that one is the one I make an exception for. I love the fact that when you go in, the pitch is well below ground level, so it feels like it's kind of like a fort or something. So I do love it. The Allianz Arena in Munich is one of the best stadiums in the world, as is the Westfalenstadion in Dortmund. The Gottlieb Daimler Stadion in Stuttgart is an excellent arena. The Schalke Stadium, I can't think what the Veltins Arena. Now a little bit dated. It's 23 years old at this point, and with their financial problems, they haven't been able to maintain it to the highest standard. In 2006, it was incredible because it wasn't long open, and retractable roofs were not nearly as prevalent then as they are now. The AOL Arena, or the Volksparkstadion in Hamburg, again, another one that had been updated and modernized in the late 90s and has been redone in recent years. It had gotten quite run down, but at the moment it's in great nick after the recent renovations. The Commerzbank Arena in Frankfurt is another tremendous stadium, quite a unique roof, really good atmosphere in that place. The Fritz Walter Stadion it looks like if you bought the San Siro off Wish, this might be what they'd send you. But it's a nice stadium. It's Kaiserslauten's home ground. It's a nice stadium. It's got a great atmosphere. The Max Morlock Stadion in Nuremberg, a little bit older, still has that old world kind of feel. Has been, upkept, and it got a bit of a facelift for this World Cup, but it was the kind of one stadium that you looked at and was like, it's not on the same level as the rest. Central Stadion, now known as the Red Bull Arena in Leipzig, was used. The AWD Arena in Hanover was used. And the Rhine Energy Stadion in Cologne, another really good stadium, was used. The Germans are just masters at this. They do stadiums brilliantly. And again, to go back to modern day, you look at the upcoming Euros and you look at the stadiums being used, and it's a lot of the same ones. You've got the Olympiastadion in Berlin, you've got the Allianz in Munich, you've got the Westfalenstadion, you've got Stuttgart, you've got Schalke, you've got Frankfurt, you've got Hamburg, you've got Cologne, you've got Leipzig. This time, you've got Dusseldorf. So Dusseldorf is in for this one. Dropping out, obviously, Nuremberg has dropped out. I think Hanover has dropped out, and Kaiserslautern has dropped out. Those are the three stadiums that have not been chosen for this one. They've reduced the number of stadiums from 12 to 10. So 3 drop out, and the one that steps in is Dusseldorf, the Dusseldorf Arena, which again, it's an older stadium that's been, it's not old, it's 20, it was built for that World Cup and then didn't get used for the World Cup, but it's been modernized. They've given the outside of it a bit of a facelift again, and it's a really nice arena. So anyway, back to 2006, 12 stadiums dotted all around Germany, which was great. There was the opportunity for all of the German people to get to go and watch major games. The only area where you've got multiple stadiums close to there, obviously Gelsenkirchen and Dortmund are quite close, and Cologne's not far away either, in that kind of Rhine-Westphalia state kind of region. But all the rest, there's a decent amount of distance between them, but it does spread the wealth quite well. Let's look at the squads next and go through some of these. So we'll start off with Group A, and Group A hosted Costa Rica, Ecuador, Germany, and Poland. When we look at that Costa Rica squad, it is largely a squad of unknown players. Only one player playing in Europe at the time, and only 3 players playing outside of their homeland. So you had Gilberto Martinez was playing for Brescia. You had Mauricio Solis was playing for Comunicaciones in Guatemala. And you had Douglas Sakira playing for Real Salt Lake. So not a squad that any of us really would have been all that familiar with unless you were regularly tuning in to watch some Costa Rican domestic football. Ecuador, again, largely based at home. Couple of players that were in Europe. Antonio Valencia, who would obviously go from Recreativo, where he was then, to Wigan, and then on to Manchester United, where obviously he's best known. He was actually owned by Villarreal at the time of this World Cup. They had signed him from El Nacional in his homeland, but then loaned him out immediately to Recreativo, and then loaned him to Wigan, and then sold him to Wigan. And he played a handful of games, 2 games for Villarreal, before being loaned the first time. But he's the best known player in this squad. You've got Christian Benitez, who went on to have a good career, is there as well. Who else do we have? Ulises de la Cruz. He played in the Premier League for Aston Villa. And that, I think, is about the height of... That's about the height of it now from me anyway. On to the Germans. They were managed by Jurgen Klinsmann. They had Jens Lehmann, who was at Arsenal. Marcel Janssen, who's a brilliant young left-back at that point. Looked like he was going to be like the next great left-back. Moved to Bayern Munich the following year and just never settled. Went to Hamburg, played his career there, retired at 30, never hit the level he was expected to hit. But he was still a good player and had a decent career. Arne Friedrich, another good player. He was at Hertha Berlin. Robert Huth was at Chelsea. He'd obviously go on to be best known at Stoke and then at Leicester, winning a league title. Sebastian Kiel, longtime servant of Dortmund. Jens Novotny, an absolute Trojan in German football, was at Bayer Leverkusen a long time. A young Bastian Schweinsteiger, 21 years of age, already had 28 caps. Torsten Frings, one of the best Werder Bremen players of all time. Oliver Neuville, who'd been part of those Leverkusen teams that had success in the early 2000s, at this point was at Gladbach. Miroslav Klose, at 28. Still, I think at that point, largely unknown outside of Germany. I know he'd done okay prior to that, but this was kind of when he really announced himself. Oliver Kahn, 36 at this point, 85 caps. Michael Ballack was the captain. And I mean, he'd been a star in the previous World Cup in 2002 and obviously missed the final. Thomas Hitzelsberger was at Stuttgart. A young Philipp Lahm, a young Per Mertesacker who was still at Hanover. Bernd Schneider, a young Lukas Podolski. Christopher Metzelder. Timo Hildebrandt, who's a talented goalkeeper that never reaches potential. And David Donker, who is not a name that would pop up all that often, but he looked like he was going to be a star. He'd been at Dortmund. He'd come through their academy. This summer, he would move to Betis. And from there, basically, his career just went downhill through injuries and lack of form and whatever, but he had a lot of knee problems. But he really made himself known at this World Cup, coming off the bench, and looked like he was a star in the making. He was 22. Kind of reminded me of what Wilfred Gnonto is now, like that same type of build, same type of explosive talent. Really good player, but didn't have the career he should have had because of injuries. In the Poland squad, Artur Buric, who was at Celtic at the time. Who else do we have here? Lucas Fabianski, a very young Lucas Fabianski who had 2 caps at this point. There is a Lewandowski in the squad, but it's Mariusz Lewandowski, not Robert. Who else is there that would have been? I mean, Kamil Kozłowski was okay, but he's not worth going into. Magic Zarewski's in that squad. I call him Magic because that's what we called him when he was at Celtic. He was a lot of fun to watch. Brilliant for Celtic. Absolutely brilliant. Lucas Fabianski being in that squad is hilarious, though. That's 18 years ago, and he's still playing. He's still playing at a high level. Moving on then, Group B, which had England, Paraguay, Sweden, and Trinidad and Tobago. So if you're asking, did England only get easy draws recently? No, they've always gotten them. Sven was manager. Paul Robinson, Gary Neville, Ashley Cole, Steven Gerrard, John Terry, Rio Ferdinand, Beckham, Lampard, Rooney, Owen, Cole, Joe Cole, Saul Campbell, David James, Wayne Bridge, Jamie Carragher, Owen Hargreaves, Jermaine Genius, Michael Carrick, Aaron Lennon, Stuart Downing. Do you know that meme of the polar bear in Texas? That's Stuart Downing in this squad. It does tail off quite a bit. Like, Hargreaves should have been a really good player, but the injuries kind of ruined his career. But before him, it's all really good players. Then Genius, another one that should have been a really good player, but never hit his potential. Carrick was incredible. Aaron Lennon had a good career, but injuries and different things played a part in him not reaching his full potential. And then it goes Stuart Downing, Peter Crouch, Scott Carson, and Theo Walcott, a young Theo Walcott, included at 17 as part of, getting experience. So Scott Carson is the only England player from that squad still playing today. But he rarely plays. He's not quite the same as Fabianski. In the Paraguay squad, let's see. Carlos Gamera, longtime international centre-back. Roque Santa Cruz, a lot of people know him from his time in the Premier League, was at Bayern. Was a good player. Roberto Acuna was a good player. Diego Gavilon was a good player. Christian Riveros, he had a pretty decent career. He's still playing. He's 42 years of age. He's still playing. He was at Sunderland for a brief spell. He's 42 in October, and he's still playing as an outfield player. Retired from international football 6 years ago. Came to Europe, came to Europe with Sunderland, had moved to Mexico a year after this World Cup, played in Mexico for a few years, came to Sunderland, didn't work out, went to Turkey, had a decent couple of years there, went to Gremio, and then moved back to Paraguay. And it's 9 years ago, and he's still trucking along. So fair play to him. Who else is in this squad? That's pretty much it. In the Swedish squad, Olaf Mellberg, Anders Svensson, good player. Freddie Lundberg, obvious one. Zlatan was 23 or 24 at that point. Henrik Larsson was 34 at that point. Johan Elmander had a pretty good career. Kim Kallstrom, back problems kind of ruined him. Pretty good squad. Trinidad and Tobago, Shaka Hislop is the standout name. Long-time Premier League goalkeeper. Ian Cox was playing for Gillingham. Marvin Andrews was playing for Rangers. Brent Sancho playing for Gillingham. Chris Birchall was playing for Port Vale. Stern John was a decent player, and Kenwyn Jones, a decent player. So that's a decent front line. They were with Coventry and Southampton, respectively. Russell Latapi, he had a good career. Hung around for a long time. Kelvin Jack, Clayton Ince. Yeah, Russell Latapi had a good career. At Rangers. He was at Hibs, where he kind of everybody got to know him in the UK, having spent a few years in Portugal with Porto and Boa Vista. He landed at Hibs, then he had 2 years at Rangers, went to Dundee, went to Falkirk, and people assumed he was finished. He was like 35, I think, at the time, and he played there for 6 years. Yeah, fair play. Russell Latapi was a good player. Moving on to Group C, Argentina, Ivory Coast, Netherlands, and Serbia and Montenegro. So quite the strong group here. You've got Roberto Ayala, Juan Pablo Sorin. You've got Colaccini, Esteban Cambiaso, Gabriela Heinze, Javier Saviola, Mascherano, Crespo, Riquelme, Tevez, Leo Franco, Lionel Scaloni, current manager of the Argentine national team, Rodrigo Palacio, who stayed at Boca Juniors too long and is best known for having had a silly haircut, Gabriel Milito, Pablo Aimar, Maxi Rodriguez, a young Lionel Messi, Nicolas Bordiso, and Lucho Gonzalez, who was always a favorite of mine. That's a really strong squad, managed by Jose Peckerman. The Ivory Coast, you've got Kolo Toure, you've got Aruna Kone. He was very young at the time, wasn't he? 22. Thought he was younger than that. Didier Drogba, obvious one. Yaya Toure at Olympiacos, no less, back then. And Emmanuel Abue in that squad. It's a pretty strong squad again. The Netherlands were managed by Marco van Basten. You've got Edwin van der Sar. You've got Khalid Boularouz, known as the Cannibal, who turned out to be just dreadful when he moved to the Premier League. Gio van Bronckhorst in that squad. Dirk Kuyt, Philippe Cocu, Ruud van Nistelrooy, Raphael van der Vaart, Arjen Robben, Jan Gronkamp, bringing back more of that polar bear in Texas. A young Robin van Persie, Mark van Bommel, Jan Vennegar of Hesselink, the greatest name in the history of names. And then you've got young Ryan Babel, young Wes Schneider, and Martin Stecklenburg, who is not long retired. Serbia, Nemanja Vidic is an obvious one. Matija Kezman, PSV, Chelsea, decent player. Dejan Stankovic in his pomp. Savo Milosevic. That's pretty well. Sasa Ilic was in that squad as well. He's a good player. Angola, I'm just going to say it now. Rui Marquez was at Leeds. I assume I'm almost certain he was Portuguese and just declared. No, he was actually Angolan. He'd never been capped. He was 28. He finally got capped just in time for that World Cup. Yeah, I have no idea. Not a clue. Aqua. Didn't he play in Europe for somebody? No, he did. He played for Benfica, but that's not where I remember him from. Maybe academic. I don't know. I know the name. Maybe it's just because it's an unusual name, so it's stuck. Iran. Like Ali Karimi was in the team. I mean, maybe the greatest Iranian player of all time. Maybe Ali Dai would be the greatest Iranian player of all time. Yeah, Ali Dai and then Karimi, two really good players. That's pretty much it for me for that one. The Mexican squad had the great Rafael Marquez at centre back. You had Guillermo Franco in the attacking line. Guillermo Ochoa was 20 years of age and had just been capped. He is still playing. Portugal. Paulo Ferreira, Ricardo Costa, Costinha, Luis Figo, Manu Petit, Paletta, Hugo Viana, Simao, Ricardo Carvalho, Luis Boamorte, Nuno Valente, Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously, he's still playing in a part-time league now. Manish, Thiago, Deco. Pretty strong squad. But also a squad of players that didn't quite reach their potential. Lot of players in that squad didn't reach the potential. The Czech Republic, there's definitely going to be some talent here. Got Petr Cech, Zdeněk Grigera, really good fullback, play centre back as well. Karol Poborski, who'd made his name 10 years earlier at Euro 96 when he scored that outrageous looped chip flick lob thing against Portugal. Jan Koller, at that point, both of them were well past their best. Pavel Nedved was also on the decline, but at the same time was only 3 years removed from having arguably been he'd won the Ballon d'Or. So, he was, he's still good. He was still good. Who else is there? Milan Baros is there. That's pretty much it. The Ghanaians, Asamoah Gyan, an obvious one. Sami Kufor was at Roma at that point. John Mensah. You've got Michael Essien. What a player. What an unbelievable player Michael Essien was. Stephen Appiah was pretty good. That's pretty much all I can remember. Oh, John Pansel is there. Where did I see his name? John Pansel was there. He was playing in Israel at the time. The Italians, Gigi Buffon in goal. You've got Zaccardo, Grosso, Cannavaro, Barzagli, Nesta, Zambrotta, Odo, and Materazzi as your defenders. Behind Buffon, you had Peruzzi and Emilia. Marco Emilia. I never quite understood the career he had. He could have been really good. Like, he was really good at Livorno. He stayed there too long. He moved to Palermo, spent a year there, moved to Genoa, had a year there. At that point, he was 28, and Buffon was aging. Peruzzi was gone. Toldo was gone. There was an opportunity for him to become the backup goalkeeper for the Italian national team and not play regularly, but Buffon would need more resting, and he could have got a lot more caps. But he never played again for the Italian national team after 2009 for whatever reason. At the age of 27, when he'd already won 9 caps, he went to Milan at 28 just to be a backup. And that's basically what he did. He sat on the bench for 4 years. And then he had missed his window. But then he was 32 and he left, and he just could have went here, went there, landed at Chelsea for a while, and I don't think he ever played for them. Like, I don't know that he played more than 10 games after leaving Milan, and he stuck about playing for like 3 years. Very odd career decisions. Who else have you got in this squad? You've got Daniele De Rossi, you've got Gattuso, you've got Camoranese, Simone Baroni, you've got Perotta, you've got Andrea Pirlo, and in attack you have Del Piero, Luca Toni, Francesco Totti, Gilardino, Iaquinta, who was bustly, we'll call him. Pipo Inzaghi. Not a vintage squad, like not the best Italian squad we've ever seen, but they were galvanized because of what was going down in Serie A with Calciopoli. And all of these players got together, had a meeting, and decided, look, fuck it. Well, let's put everything to one side and let's just go and lift the shame that's currently clouding our football. Managed by the incredible Marcello Lippi. United States, managed by Bruce Arena. You've got Tim Howard, Carlos Bocanegra, Eddie Lewis, Claudio Reyna, Casey Kelleher was in that squad, Brian McBride, Eddie Pope, who I loved. It always annoyed me that he never left MLS and came to Europe. Had himself a really good career in MLS, but he could have come to Europe and done really well. He was really good. Group F then. Am I on F already? Yeah, I am. Group F, Australia, Brazil, Croatia, and Japan. The Aussies, plenty of English-based players here. Mark Schwarzer, Lucas Neal, Craig Moore, Tim Cahill, Tony Popovich, Brett Emerton, Joseph Skogo, I don't remember. Mark Viduka, Harry Kuehl, Stan Lazaridis. A lot of them were getting to the tail end of their primes, but still good players. John Aloisi was in that squad. Archie Thompson was in that squad. Luke Wilkshire was in that squad as well. Mark Bresciano, another really good player. Brazil, the defending champions, managed by Carlos Alberto Pereira, because Scolari had left the Brazilian team after the last World Cup and gone to flop in other jobs. Dida, Cafu, Lucio, Juan, Emerson, really good player. Really, really good player. Still to this day, gutted for him that he missed out on 2002, because it should have been him lifting the trophy. He was the captain, and he got injured in a training session, pricking about playing in goal. Dived for a ball, dislocated his shoulder, missed the World Cup. Roberto Carlos, Adriano back when he was a monster. Kaká ascending to become the best player in the world. Ronaldo, the less said the better. Ronaldinho, the best player in the world at this point. Ziriberto, Rodrigo Seni, some fairly average players in this squad, but you do have Gilberto Silva. You have Juninho, the one from Lyon that took all the mad free kicks. You have Fred, not the United midfielder, the striker, who wasn't great. And Julio Cesar, who was at Inter Milan at that point. And you also had a young Robinho, who we won't be talking about. Zlatko Kranjčar was manager of Croatia. Dario Serna was in the squad. Robert Kovac was in the squad. Igor Tudor, Dario Simic, Niko Kovac, Luka Modric, age 20. Ivan Klasnic was in that squad. Ivica Olic was in that squad. It's a really good squad, to be fair. Bosko Balaban, there's one. So, in the 90s, Aston Villa had bought Savo Milosevic, who didn't do all that well at Villa. They spent pretty big money to bring him in. This is around the time that we started to see a lot of Serbian and the Yugoslavia had fallen apart, and a lot of the Serbian players and Croatians were moving abroad. And Milosevic landed in the Premier League and didn't do very well, and was known as Savo Misalotovic, Savo Maflopovic, and other such names, but left and went on and had a good career without question. Villa decided to repeat the trick, and they went to Dinamo Zagreb in 2001, and they spent 5.8 million to bring in Bosko Balaban. He stayed 2.5 years, started twice, 7 sub-appearances, 0 goals, and genuinely has to be in the conversation for the worst Premier League signing of all time. Now, look, he went on and had a pretty good career. He went back to Zagreb on loan. He banged in goals for fun. Club Brugge signed him. He banged in goals for fun. He went back to Zagreb. He scored some goals. Went and played in Greece and scored some goals there. And he had a decent international career, winning 35 caps and 10 goals. But he was absolutely fucking rotten in the Premier League. And swearing is necessary here. He was vile. He was that bad. Now, he's a good player, no question. And I'm sure he's a really nice guy. He didn't cause any trouble. He never complained, never did any of that. But my God, he couldn't play in the Premier League. Like, he'd come short for a pass and his winger'd play it to him and move for the give and go. And it'd bounce off him, or he'd play it back to where the winger was stood 3 seconds ago. He couldn't, whether it was the pressure of dealing with the move and the money, because like back then, 5.8 million was a decent amount of money. Whether it was the crowd he couldn't cope with, whether he just didn't like life in it, I don't know what it was, but he just couldn't seem to function. He just couldn't seem to function at all. There used to be a clip that used to go around of him chasing after ball and just falling over his own feet. I just mean, there's no one around him and he's running after a ball. It's a bit of a lost cause type of job, you know, like one play to the corner, he just runs after to try and keep it in play, knowing he's not going to get it. But that's the type of thing that kind of gets the crowd to start getting behind you because you're putting in the hard yards. And he just falls over his own feet. Nobody near him, just face plant. Yeah. Not great now. Not great at all. We move on to Japan. Nakata's the obvious one here. I mean, what a player. What an absolutely brilliant player. And the reason you know he was a great player is because he wrote an entire book to tell you. Nakamura would have been my favourite player in that squad. He was brilliant for Celtic. Absolutely brilliant. One of the best free kick takers I've ever seen. Yunushi Inamoto, another player I quite liked. He was at West Brom at this point. Arsenal had brought him to England on loan, but he'd never played. Then he went on loan to Fulham and he did really well. And then West Brom bought him because Fulham couldn't afford him. He also played for Cardiff and he had a good career. You know, he played in Europe for a good while and then went home and played at home. And to my surprise, he's still playing. He is 44 years of age and he's still playing. Nankatsu Sports Club. They play in the Kanto Soccer League. Now, what level is that? The Kanto Soccer League is the 5th tier. So this is a guy who's still playing for love of the game. And I applaud that. I think that's fantastic. I love seeing that. Group G, France, South Korea, Switzerland, and Togo. We'll start with Togo. I'm guessing Adebayor is the only player I'll know in that squad. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much the only player that is coming to mind is Adebayor, who was 22 at the time. Switzerland. Johan Juru came through at Arsenal. Big, powerful centre-back, but never developed into much. Same with Philippe Senderos, who also was at Arsenal at the time. Johan Vogel, I mentioned him recently, actually. He was a really good midfielder. Rafael Vicky was a good player. Alex Fry was a good forward player. Valen Barami was a really good player. Really good. Young at the time. He's 21 here. He would go on and have a pretty good career for himself. And Hakan Yakin, who born in Switzerland to Turkish parents, he was at Basel, went to Grasshoppers, and then bounced around. And I never really understood his career because he should have been out of Switzerland at like 21, but he didn't go till he was 26, and he went to PSG. He was never going to get a game there. And you look at what they had in that squad back in 2003. This is before the money, but still a great squad. Had a year at Stuttgart, a loan at Galatasaray. Like, he never did it outside, but he was a really good player. Gorgeous left foot. Absolutely gorgeous left foot. and had some phenomenally good performances in Europe for Basel, for Grasshoppers, and for Young Boys later on. Really, really good player. His brother Murat, though, was the one I really liked. He'd come through at Grasshoppers. Well, remember I mentioned Grasshoppers Academy, how good it was? He went and played for Fenerbahce for a while. But again, never quite did it outside of Switzerland for whatever reason. But really good players, the two Yakin brothers. Barami was a good player. A lot of people remember him from West Ham. He was also at Fiorentina. He was at Napoli. He was at Lazio. He played for another Premier League club after that as well. Let me just check. Watford. He played for Watford, yeah. Really good player. Really, really good box-to-box, energetic, good on the ball. Really good player. David Degan, twin brother of Philip Degan, who Liverpool fans will not have fond memories of, and was also in this squad. Moving on then to South Korea, Park Ji-sung. That is probably the only one. Yeah, Park Ji-sung. And then the French. You've got Landreau, you've got Boom Sung, one of the more disappointing centre-backs of the last 20 years or so. Eric Abidal, Patrick Vieira, William Gallas, Claude Makelele, Malouda, Zidane, Wiltord, Henry, Mikel Silvestre. I mean, when France started capping him that many times, they had problems. Lilian Thuram. Most of these French stars are past the best at this point. You've got Vieira in his prime, Gallas in his prime, Henry in his prime, which was, incredible. And that's kind of it. All the rest of and Trezeguet. All the rest are past their best, or there's some young players. But those young players, the only one that really worked out was Frank Ribery. But Pascal Chimbonda was in that squad for some reason. I still to this day don't know why. Group H, finally, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Tunisia, and Ukraine will fly. I don't know anyone in that Saudi Arabian squad. The Spanish squad, Iker Casillas, Michel Salgado, Carlos Marchena, Carlos Puyol, Raul, Xavi, Fernando Torres, Jose Antonio Reyes, Luis Garcia, Xabi Alonso, Sergio Ramos, Cesc Fabregas, Joaquin, David Villa, Andreas Iniesta. 2 years after this tournament, this group of players, with one or two more added, would take over the world and dominate it for 4 years, winning two European championships and a World Cup sandwiched in between. No one had any clue at this point that was going to happen. Like, this was a really talented squad. They were favoured to do quite well, but no one had any clue what was about to happen. Tunisia, Mehdi Nafti, played for Birmingham. Hamid Namouchi, I don't remember him at Rangers. That's pretty much it. Ukraine, Shevchenko is the obvious one. Timaschuk, the midfielder, he's in there too. Voronin, Rebrov. That's pretty much me for that squad. And that's pretty much me for the squads. So, what took place in this World Cup? Well, the obvious place to start is the group stage. And in Group A, Germany topped the group with 9 points ahead of Ecuador. Poland finishing third and Costa Rica bottom. Germany won all 3 games. Ecuador beat Poland and beat Costa Rica. Poland beat Costa Rica, and that's what we had. In Group B, England topped the group with 7 points. They beat Paraguay, they beat Trinidad, and they drew with Sweden. Sweden finished second. They drew with Trinidad, beat Paraguay, and obviously drew with England. Paraguay beat Trinidad, so Trinidad finished bottom. Group C, Argentina top, 7 points. Netherlands 7 points, goal difference separating them. Ivory Coast 3 points, Serbia no points. Argentina beat the Ivory Coast, beat Serbia, and then drew with the Netherlands. And obviously the Netherlands also beat the Ivory Coast and Serbia, and then the Ivory Coast beat Serbia 3-2, having been 2-0 down after 20 minutes. Dindane scored 2, and Kalu scored the other. Aruna Dindane, I don't remember him. Who did he play for? Anderlecht, Lons. He's in the Premier League with Portsmouth. I don't remember him at Portsmouth. I don't remember him at all. He scored 8 goals. He joined Crystal Palace but never played for them. He's old at that point. I genuinely don't remember him at all. Aruna Dindane. Huh. Odd. Okay. Moving on. Group D. Portugal, top of the group at 9 points. Obviously won all 3 games. Mexico finished second. They beat Iran and drew at Angola. Angola drew at Mexico and Iran. Iran lost their other 2 games, obviously, so they finished bottom. Group E. Italy top, Ghana second. Czech Republic third. The USA bottom. USA got 1 point. That was from a draw with Italy. Italy beat Ghana. Italy beat Czech Republic. And Ghana beat the Czech Republic. Moving on to Group F. Brazil top, 9 points. Won all 3 games pretty comfortably. Australia second, though. That was the big upset. They beat Japan in their opening game. They were 1-0 down on 84 minutes. Cahill scored. Then he scored again on the 89th minute, and then Aloisi scored in the 92nd minute. Kaká scored the only goal of the Brazil-Croatia game. Then Japan and Croatia drew. Brazil beat Australia 2-0, Adriano and Fred. And then Brazil beat Japan 4-1. Ronaldo got 2, Juninho scored, and Gilberto scored. Not Gilberto Silva, a different Gilberto. And then Australia and Croatia played at a 2-2 draw. Australia were 1-0 down, equalised, 2-1 down, and equalised again, and got themselves through to the knockouts. Group G, Switzerland top, 7 points ahead of France. Those 2 sides played at a 0-0 draw, while South Korea beat Togo. Then France drew with South Korea, while Switzerland beat Togo. Then France beat Togo, and Switzerland beat South Korea. And in Group H, Spain won all 3 games. They beat Ukraine 4-0. They beat Tunisia 3-1. And they beat Saudi Arabia 1-0. Tunisia and Saudi played out a 0-0 draw. Ukraine beat Tunisia, and Ukraine beat Saudi Arabia. So Ukraine went through in second place with 6 points. Tunisia and Saudi finished on 1 point each. We go into the knockout stage. So, round of 16, Germany 2, Sweden 0. Lucas Podolski with both goals. He really was kind of announcing himself as a star in the making at this point. 21 years of age. He just had a brilliant season for Cologne. Bayern, as they always do, had already wrapped him up, and he was announcing that they'd gotten themselves a really good player. 2-0 win over the Swedes, and that was kind of the end of Henrik Larsson's international career. He did stick around for the 3 years, but never played at another World Cup. Argentina 2, Mexico 1. Rafael Marquez put Mexico 1 up on 6 minutes. Hernan Crespo equalizes on 10. No further goals, and then we get to penalties, and Maxi Rodriguez scores to win the game for Argentina and send them through. England 1, Ecuador 0. David Beckham with the only goal of the game to spare English blushes. England were dreadful in that game. Absolutely dreadful in that game. And it's funny to look at England playing Ecuador and playing 4-1-4-1 with Wayne Rooney as the only player up front. And the players that came off the bench, Carragher for Joe Cole, who was left wing, then Aaron Lennon for Beckham, who was right wing, and Stuart Downing for Gerrard in central midfield. Peter Crouch and Michael Owen named on the bench. Neither of them even looked at. 1-0 win. They were brutal. They deserved to lose that game. John Terry was voted man of the match, which will tell you exactly what took place. Portugal won, the Netherlands 0. Maniche with the only goal of the game on 23 minutes. Italy won, Australia 0. Australia were incredible in that game. Buffon was man of the match. Materazzi was sent off on 50, and Australia battered them and should have won the game, but Totti scored a penalty 5 minutes into stoppage time, and the Aussies were fuming. And I think they had reason to be fuming. Switzerland and Ukraine played at a 0-0 draw, and then Ukraine won 3-0 on penalties. Brazil beat Ghana 3-0. Ronaldo, Adriano, and Zé Roberto with the goals. And then the final round of 16 game, France 3, Spain 1. And Spain had been favourites to beat France in that one. Because the French were seen as, the time is up. They won the World Cup in 98. They won the Euros in 2000. And they hadn't been good at the two tournaments in between 2000 and 2006. They weren't good in 2002 when out in the group stage. They weren't good in 2004. And it was like they were old. And there wasn't a group of young players coming through. Ribery was the only one. And yet they upset the apple cart here with a 3-1 win. Having gone 1-0 down to a David Villa penalty, Ribery scores, Vieira scores, and Zidane scores. And the Vieira goal was 82 minutes, and the Zidane goal was the Vieira goal was 83 minutes, and the Zidane goal was 92 minutes. So they were late goals. Quarterfinals, Germany versus Argentina. I won't lie, I was heavily backing Argentina to win this one, largely because it's Argentina. Argentina went 1-0 up through Roberto Ayala. Miroslav Klose equalised. And then in penalties, Germany did what they do, and Germany won the penalty shootout 4-2. Next up, Italy versus Ukraine. Zambrotta scores on 6 minutes, and then Luca Toni scores on 59 and 69 to send the Italians through. England 0, Portugal 0. Wayne Rooney sent off in the 60th minute. Everybody remembers the infamous Cristiano Ronaldo wink at the camera. And England lost 3-1 on penalties. Lampard, Gerrard, and Carragher all missing. Only Owen Hargreaves scored. Whereas Simão, Postiga, and Cristiano scored for Portugal. Hugo Viana and Manu Petit Armando Petit. They both missed. Brazil versus France. Again, Brazil heavily favoured. Reigning World Cup champions. Best player in the world in Ronaldinho. The forthcoming best player in the world in Kaká. You've got Ronaldo. You've got Gilberto Silva doing your dog work. You've got Zé Roberto. You've got Juninho in that team, Roberto Carlos. I think it's a really good team. France are a bunch of outflas, bunch of geezers. And Thierry Henry scores in the 57th minute. And France are in a World Cup semi-final. Germany 0, Italy 2. 0-0 after 90 minutes. 0-0 after 118 minutes. Fabio Grosso scores on 119, and then Del Piero scores on 121 when the Germans had just launched everybody forward, trying to save things. And the Italians are through. So that's one team that wasn't fancied in the final. It was the fourth time Italy had defeated the host nation of a World Cup tournament. They beat France in 1938, Mexico in 1970, and Argentina in 78. The other semi-final then was Portugal versus France. And Portugal, they were seen as a team on the up. They should have won the Euros in 2004. We were getting towards the end of the Luis Figo era, but he was still a great player. But you had Deco, you had Cristiano, you had Carvalho, you had all these good young players that were coming through. And, some of them were in the mid-20s at this point. And they were just expected to beat France. But Zidane scores a penalty on 33 minutes, and that's it. Good night and God bless. You're not scoring on France. They've got Lilian Thuram, 34 years of age, playing like he's back in his prime at centre-back. Not at right-back where he'd won the World Cup, but at centre-back. Him and Gallas. Him reading the game, doing all the decision-making, and Gallas doing the fetching and carrying, the dog work. Abidal always composed at left-back. Willy Sagnol at right-back was always pretty good as well. Then Vieira and Makelele in front. Now, Vieira was going box-to-box, but obviously Makelele was sitting there. Then you had Ribery right, Zidane 10, Florent Malouda on the left, and Thierry Henry up front. Malouda, Sagnol, Gallas, you'd say, are the weak links in that team in terms of they're not elite level players, but they were all good players. There was no bad player in that team. They're all good players. Third and fourth place playoff then. Germany become the third place team, beating Portugal 3-1. Schweinsteiger, a Petit own goal, and Schweinsteiger again. Nuno Gomez grabbed a late consolation goal, but it was not to be. And into the final we go. Now, this final is famous for a couple of things. 3 things, really. This World Cup had been great. It had been great. Especially as a nostalgic fool like me, even though I wasn't an outfit at that point. Just seeing that French team get to the final. And by this point, it was all in on the French. It was all in on the French winning the World Cup, Zidane getting a second one. But it just wasn't to be. Zidane opens the scoring on 7 minutes. This is the first memorable moment of this game. It's the Panenka penalty against Gigi Buffon that clips the underside of the bar and comes down and lands just behind the line. Like he was right on the edge there of missing that. Materazzi equalises on 19 minutes. The second memorable moment comes in extra time. We end 1-1, we go to extra time. We know at this point, it's 110 minutes in, legs are gone. You've got a lot of Alflas on both sides, because you've got Gattuso and Pirlo and Cannavaro and Buffon, who are all, 30 or above at this point. Actually, would Buffon would have been 29, maybe. Pirlo fair was 27, but he always played like an alpha. Cannavaro has to have been 30. Yeah, he's 33. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So we get to extra time. Everybody knows the game is going to penalties. Everybody. Both sides have pretty much accepted it. And Materazzi says something to Zidane, and we get the most iconic moment of this World Cup, which is Zidane planting his forehead into the middle of Materazzi's chest and leaving him on the floor in a heap. And the game ends 1-1 with Zidane sent off, his career over. That was the last game of his career. Everybody knew he was retiring. And the last moment of his career was him planting Materazzi on his back with a headbutt. And to be fair, not a bad way to go out. We go to the penalty shootout. Pirlo scores. Wiltord scores. Materazzi scores. Trezeguet misses. De Rossi scores. Abidal scores. Del Piero scores. Now Sagnol has to score or it's over. But Sagnol scores. And then Fabio Grosso, who, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't originally intended to be in the squad, was like a late call-up to the squad. I could be wrong about that. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think there was somebody else that was maybe it was just somebody else meant to be in that squad and ended up having to drop out, but he wasn't a player that was all that well known, Fabio Grosso. Not outside of Italy. He'd played for Perugia and he'd played for Palermo. After this World Cup, he would go to Inter Milan. It didn't work out. He went to Lyon. And then he finished off at Juve. But he's 29 at this point. And he was at Renato Curie, who's a club I don't know. He stayed there till he was 22. Went to Chieti for 2 years, Perugia for 3, and Palermo for 2. He wasn't a well-known player. That club he began with currently plays in the 5th division of Italian football. And up he steps. He's already scored in the semi-final. And he scores the winning penalty. And the scene of him wheeling away with his arms stretched out is an absolutely iconic World Cup moment. And Italy win the World Cup. A team that was written off. Nobody expected them to do it. But they win their 4th World Cup. And it was a great spectacle. Like, if you're looking for excitement, it's not the World Cup final for you. But it was a really good game, a really good tactical battle. You had Lippi in one dugout, you had Dominici in the other. And they played each other to a standstill, it must be said. They played each other to a standstill, but it was a really good World Cup final and a great World Cup. And your top goal scorer was Miroslav Klose. He scored 5 goals. You had 8 players with 3: Ronaldo, Zidane, Crespo, Podolski, Maxi Rodriguez, Torres, Henry, and David Villa. You had, I missed Paulo Wanchop in the Costa Rica squad somehow. And Thomas Rosicky in the Czech squad. What's wrong with me? You had 17 players scored 2 goals, and then a whole bunch scored 1. Golden Boot, Miroslav Klose. Golden Ball, awarded to the best player in the tournament, Zinedine Zidane. The Ashen Award for Best Goalkeeper went to Gianluigi Buffon. The best young player was Lucas Podolski. The Fair Play trophy was split between Brazil and Spain. And Portugal were voted most entertaining. The All-Star team, the goalkeepers were Buffon, Lehmann, and Ricardo of Portugal. Defenders, Ayala, Terry, Thuram, Lam, Cannavaro, Zambrotta, and Ricardo Carvalho. Midfielders, Zé Roberto, Vieira, Zidane, Ballack, Pirlo, Gattuso, Totti, Figo, and Maniche. And the forwards were Crespo, Henry, Klose, and Luca Toni. Now, while Zidane did win the Best Player award, the Ballon d'Or that year would be awarded to a defender, and a proper defender. Not like when Matthias Sammer won it as a midfielder playing as a sweeper. It was awarded to Fabio Cannavaro, ahead of Buffon, who finished 2nd. Henry finished 3rd. Ronaldinho was 4th that year. And Zidane was 5th. Now, Ronaldinho had won it the year before in 2004. Kaká would win it in 2007. And really and truly should have won it in 2008 as well. But, they had to give it to Cristiano because he might have cried otherwise. But yeah, so Cannavaro, Buffon, Henry, Ronaldinho, Zidane, Eto'o was 6th, Klose 7th, Drogba 8th, Pirlo 9th. Jens Lehmann was voted 10th. Deco, Kaká, Ribery, Gattuso, Vieira, Cristiano joined 15th, but in truth, that would make him 12, 13, 14, 15. 16th, basically. 17th, actually. Then Frank Lampard, Podolski, Carlos Puyol, Juninho, Messi, Luca Toni, John Terry, Zambrotta, Philippe Lam, and David Villa all getting votes. But yeah, Cannavaro winning the Ballon d'Or off the back of the Italians winning the World Cup. And we'll go to break and be back after this. Right, let's just get wrapped up and get out of here. Barcelona have announced Hansi Flick as their new manager. I really don't know what to make of it. It seems like a bad fit to me, but I hope he does well. Chelsea have appointed a new manager for their women's team. It is Sonia Bompastor. She has been at Lyon for 3 years and won a Champions League and also lost a Champions League this season. She's bringing her coaching staff as well. Vincent Kompany has been appointed as the new manager of Bayern Munich. They've paid a compensation fee of 10.2 million for Vincent Kompany, who's your 8th choice manager. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. 10.2 million for Vincent Kompany, who we don't know if he's a good manager or not yet. Well, best of luck to him. I hope it goes well, but they will sack you as soon as things go badly. There's just no doubt about that. Let's see. Spurs have agreed to extend the loan of Timo Werner from RB Leipzig rather than taking up the option of buying him permanently. Newcastle have released 5 players. Paul Dummett, Matt Ritchie, and Loris Karius are among them. Kel Watts and Jeff Hendrick, the Cuz. The Cuz becomes the hottest free agent on the market. Someone get him snapped up before it's too late. Bournemouth have completed the permanent signing of Ines Unal, who they brought in on loan from Getafe. 13 million, pretty good value. I think he did quite well there. Everton are interested in a loan deal for Calvin Phillips, which is an interesting one. It's an interesting one. On to the gossip. A number of Saudi Pro League clubs are keen on Casemiro. Well, United better hope they are because no one else wants him. West Ham have agreed a 15 million deal with Flamengo to buy Fabricio Bruno. 28 years of age. It's a gamble. It's a gamble. 28 years of age. Never played outside of Brazil before. He's very good. He's big and he's powerful. He's very good. But that's a gamble, no matter what way you look at it. He's only been capped twice by Brazil, both this year. Mason Greenwood wants to return to Getafe. Good for him. Champions League finalists Borussia Dortmund are interested in signing Greenwood. I don't believe they are. That's Mark Ogden. That's planted by United. Aston Villa and Crystal Palace are eyeing a move for Ghent's 22-year-old English defender Archie Brown. Brown was at Derby when things went belly up there. Lausanne, the team owned by Ineos, nabbed him. He went there. He played 2 years for them, and then Ghent signed him last summer. I think on a free. I don't know how well he's done, but I'm sure there will be English clubs interested. Barcelona could try to bring João Felix back for a second loan spell. I think Atleti want to sell. Liverpool have placed a £20 million valuation on Sepp Vandenberg. Okay. The Reds are interested in signing Ederson. Yes, please. Napoli have no intention of selling Kvicha Kvaratskhelia. Antonio Conte will want to keep him, I think. I think he'll want to keep him. I think he'll use him similar to how he used Hazard when he won the league with Chelsea. Newcastle are pushing for an answer about a potential deal for Tosin Adarabioyo. Real Madrid's Ford Rodrigo has cast doubts about his future at the club, raising the possibility of a move to Liverpool. Yes, please. Would absolutely love him. Would genuinely love him. Tottenham will look to sell Jed Spence and Brian Hill. Competition is growing for RB Leipzig's Ford. He's more of a winger or a midfielder. Danny Olmo with Barcelona, United, City, Liverpool, and Bayern Munich all interested. I think he's going to go to City because they've missed out on Paqueta. Southampton are eyeing Sunderland's 23-year-old English midfielder Jack Clark. That would be a good signing. Inter Milan are interested in Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He'd be horrible in the back three. He could play as the right-sided one in the three. Imagine him as a wing-back. Oh, Lord. Mikel Arteta is in advanced talks with Arsenal over a new contract. It's Football Insider, so it might not be true, but it probably is true because, Arsenal don't need to win anything. It's all about geniuses and overachieving and spending 620 million for no trophies. Xavi's desire to sell Robert Lewandowski this summer was the key reason behind his sacking. So he wanted to do what was right, and the club are idiots, is what we're learning there. Right, folks, that will do me for today. I will see you all tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.